Racial discrimination in the United States is much more subtle than it was only a few decades ago. As a nation, we made major strides for equality, and while many problems have been stifled or changed, there still remain a many number of problems that we have not talked about. Racial minorities across the country still face many instances of discrimination across the country, many of which are hidden within society. The past. The civil rights movement of the 1960s was a major turning point in our push for equality. And when you think about the racism of the time, you often think of people being beaten up by policemen, black residents facing many hate crimes, and even firemen spraying down crowds of protesters using their high pressure water hoses. In our class, we have also seen and talked about how Mexicans were discriminated against in the past. Poor farm workers being abused, the Bracero program, which amplified these poor working environments, and the exploitation of Mexican workers. These are extreme cases of racism, and what most people think of when you hear the term racial discrimination. When we look back at the past, we see so many horrible examples of killings, beatings, and segregation. The present. While we still have extreme cases of racism, like the war on the US Mexico border, unfair justice systems, a poorly built police system, Black Lives Matter protests being met with police brutality, there still is progress. While the Black Lives Matter protests are often met with great resistance and violence, the amount of casualties between the civil rights protests and the Black Lives Matter protests alone have been reduced by around 38%, 41 deaths opposed to 25 deaths. While the reductions of killings and physical hate crimes committed by the general public is unclear in the previous decades, I've noticed a downward trend occurring from the 1990s and onward. With a report from the U.S. Department of Justice in 1992, there were 6,623 accounts of hate crimes based on race. And according to a study made by the FBI in 2013, there were around 3,407 reports of hate crimes based on race. And according to the U.S. Department of Justice study, 60% of the crimes were made up of intimidation and property damage and did not injure any persons. Although there has been significant progress, the problem of discrimination still exists. They just appear in more subtler forms. Segregation. What do you think of when you hear segregation? Black and white news stations? Ruby bridges? Many people think of segregation as a problem of long ago and think it's over. But according to a study made by the NBC, major metropolitan areas are actually more segregated in 2019 than they were in 1990. This type of segregation is de facto. It might not be illegal, but it is the remnants of the more apparent segregation, and it affects both schools and properties. This happened because wealth in schools in segregated Black and Hispanic neighborhoods were so poor, even after the laws were torn down, people who wanted to move away from these neighborhoods could not, because they did not have enough money or resources to do so. And since schools in the United States mostly get their money from property taxes, schools in Black or Latino neighborhoods had less to spend than those of the white neighborhoods, which means that they could not afford as many books, facilities, teachers, and even advanced subjects. This in turn meant that people who wanted to go to school to get a better education had less opportunities to do so. So most people were just stuck and could not get away. Even today, Black applicants are around twice as likely to get rejected for mortgages than white applicants are. Being rejected for applications solely based on the color of your skin is also one of the biggest forms of racism that goes unnoticed in today's world. A study conducted by Harvard stated that Black applicants are 36% less likely to receive a callback from an employer with identical resumes than white applicants are, and Latinos being 24% less likely. Even Black and Latino Airbnb residents are 16% less likely to be accepted. Even though all of this looks grim, I think the fact that we can focus on smaller forms of racism shows the progress that we have made as a nation. Black women are joining the workforce now more than ever. Black men have closed the wage gaps between white men by one-thirds. The average Black and Latino education has gotten better, with the reading proficiency gap being much closer. And there are more Black college applicants now than there ever was before. While this progress is great, there is still much more progress to be made. I think it's great that we are able to study and find better solutions to make this nation a better place for everyone.